Hello, welcome to a new video. Today we are having a look at 5 Max for Live devices which I have recently discovered, and I thought I would make a video about them because they are really useful for sound designing and I think you might like them as well. Usually I don't use Max for Live devices that much in my workflow, but BS Audio Tools sent me a few of them and I tried them out and I was surprised by how good they are for sound designing. And this is why I'm showcasing them to you now and I will review them for you on some sounds. Also there will be a bonus one at the end. The first one is called Spec Volume, which is basically a mixture of a spectral gate, limiter and compressor in one. I prepared this little sound for you, just a spectral razor kind of sound which I made a few months ago. And when we use the spec volume, you can see we have this little window here with this linear curve and we can draw dots in here. And you can see we already get a different sound here. And this, for example, sounds like a spectral gate. And we can also use it like a compressor and make certain things louder or quieter, for example. And the cool thing is, you don't really have to understand what it does because there is a random button and you can come up with really sick and unique results immediately, which is perfect for sound designing. It's slightly different all the time. We also have a drive knob, an input knob, dveight knob, nothing special. But then we can go into the menu and also increase the FFT size, for example, to 4096 and also the FFT overlapping. And we can also set more random points and increase the variation of the random. And now we get even crazier results like this one, for example. Let me save this sound really quick. All right, the sound is saved. You see, it's really great for sound designing and making more of already existing sounds. You can also try it on a drum loop. You can also turn drum loops into something completely different. This is sick. More like gated, basically. Yeah, really interesting results. Now we can continue with the spectral distortion, which looks like this. Let's also start with the same input sound again. And this is what it sounds like from the beginning. So basically also like a gated effect. And we can also move some parameters here. Of course, there's a random device. Again, we will click that later. We can increase the size. And you see, it opens up. Also an offset button, a scale knob, which increases the bands here. A glitch knob for some randomization happening inside the sound. A tone knob, also a drive knob, some bias. And we can also change the FFT size or the mode. And you can see we get some nice artifacts. Now let's press the random knob. Ooh, this one is pretty damn sick. You also said this one. Once again, you can see you don't have to understand what it does. And then you get great results immediately again. Just press random and it changes all the parameters. This one is also crazy. Now you can just resample. Let's also try it on the drum once again. This one is crazy too. And this works on any sound. We can also try it on some vocal. Let me just grab this one really quick. And you can turn vocals into something really sick as well. Of course, it needs more mixing, but I think this tool is great for sound designing in general. Also, if you want to understand what other parameters and Max for Live devices do in particular, the founder behind BS Audio Tools also included a little question mark here, which allows us to open a new window, and then we can press onto the open manual, and it opens the manual in a different tab here in your browser, and everything is explained really well. I definitely recommend you doing this if you want to understand the technical stuff behind these cool devices. Now let's have a look at the next one, which is called Spectral Delay. Let's try this sound. This one is really short and I think it's great for some delay. Yeah, these sounds I'm using here are basically just audio files I saved from projects I've been working on. And this is what it looks like, the spectral delay. We have control over the time, the feedback and the gain. And there are 3 different randomization buttons, as you can see here. Also, we can, of course, draw the shapes ourselves, but I think nobody will do it in the end because the randomization is just too powerful and gives us so much control. So let's just press the random knob a few times. And you can see we already get some really spectral delayed sound out of it. Also, there is a really cool panic knob in here on the feedback. For example, if the feedback gets too long and if you just want to stop it immediately, which is great. Also, we can increase the FFT size once again, the overlapping. We can let it draw more points. We can also set the curve off, so it's just linear lines all the time. We can increase the variation, time bias, feedback bias, gain bias. And get even crazier results. Also, there's a drive knob. And the cool thing is, as you can see here, we are not redlining, so there's also a built-in limiter. And I think this also applies for other devices. So there's lots of control and safety options. So there's lots of control and limiting happening. We can also disable the quantizing, the volume, and the pitch. And we can also clear all the tapes. This one is also great for sound designing. Let's jump over to the next one, which is actually free and is called the Convolver mod. And the Convolver mod is basically an extended version of the already existing Ableton Live Max for Live device called Convolver by a different developer. BS Audio Tools basically took this and stepped it up to the next level. This one is actually really crazy. Let's use the same input sound again. This one. And this is what it sounds like by default. The most unique thing about this is when you have an impulse response like the Rundle Nave thing. Also, this comes with a few impulse responses right away. You can see the file of the impulse response here, where I'm hovering with my mouse right now. And you can basically select this area from the tail and now let this be the impulse response. You might think it's getting really quiet down here, but it's also normalizing it to a volume which allows us to get a significant effect on the convolver. We can do that with every bit from the impulse response here. Also, there's a really cool taper which allows us to customize it even further and basically decide when it's coming in, when it's stopping. This is really crazy for lots of control. And this one is free on BS Audio Tools. I will also leave a link in the description. Also, if you're interested in the other ones which are paid, BS Audio Tools also gave me a little discount code for you, which is BassTi15, and I will also leave the link in the description and in the pinned comment. There are a bunch of free ones on the site and also a bunch of paid ones if you're interested. Oh, this one is great. There are plenty of knobs like the size, the decay, the pre-delay, the width, a gain knob, and tri-wet, of course. And an EQ. And this also allows us more customization right away. Let's also try a different one from the impulse responses. Also, there are different types here. Let's try the jazz hall. Of course, we can also load sounds in here as well. You can convolve it with the sound itself and get really interesting results. This is really sick. That's great for sound designing. And last but not least, there's the wave shaper. Let's use this sound once again, which is also crazy for distorting and sound designing in general. We have this field right here, which we remember from the spectral volume thing right here, for example. You can also draw the curve again and get really nice and crunchy distortion. And of course, we can decide how many points we want, what the variation is, if we want curves or just linear lines, and you can decide if you want curves or just linear lines. The cool thing about this device is that there is an A/B knob. You can basically switch between two curves. You have curve A, which looks like this, and curve B, which is still plain. And we can also draw something here or randomize it. And then switch between A and B. This is what curve B sounds like, and this is what curve A sounds like. Now we can morph between them. There's a visualization, which is basically the heart of this, because now we are able to see what the wave shaping is actually doing. We can switch between input and sine, a spectrum and waveform, tone dry, high dry, and gain overlay. We can now see what's happening in the spectrum, what's being added, and what's happening. Also, there are different algorithms like clipping, fold, and wrapping. Plus, there's a bias. And you can also turn off the limiter if you want. Also, there's enough for the DC offset, and you can switch between asymmetric distortion and symmetric distortion. And we can just press random again until we get a result which we like. This sounds really watery. Let me actually resample that. This might be a good layer in a song I'm currently working on. And these were basically just 5 from many Max for Live devices BS Audio Tools have already created. I can definitely recommend you checking him out because there's so much great stuff on there, which is great for sound designing and experimental fun, basically. And now I'm going to show you the bonus one, which is basically an unreleased one, but it's already included in the mega pack BS Audio Tools providing on the website. This one is called reese, and what it does, it basically tracks the pitch of the input sound and allows us to get a clean sub under a sound. For example, we have this glitch sound right here. Now we can add a sub which would sound like this. There are a few knobs in here. For example, the thrust knob, which basically lets us decide if we want less movement. And we can also turn up the mix. This is how I use it already. So we just had the raw sub happening basically. We can change the waveform to a clean sine with some nice overtones. And we can also do some emphasis and shaping. And we can also give it some pitch bend movement by just transposing it to +48. There's also some different algorithms here, like octaves, smart, and none. And in this case, the smart one works the best. And the way I used it was basically putting this at the end of the chain or at the beginning, I can't remember exactly. And then I basically just reset the sub, which sounded like this, and pitch it around. In context, we now have a really cool sub for this glitchy part right here. And in context, little sneak peek, it would sound like this. And here's the sub. And that's basically it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough about these 5 Max for Live devices plus the bonus one here at the end. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and also make sure to check out the BS Audio Tools website for lots of free Max for Live devices. And if you're interested in some paid ones, also feel free to check them out because I think they can be really useful for sound designing, and you might want. And now we are, and see you in the next video. Have a great day and goodbye.